Today we're going to block my Simplicity shawl, which is just a basic triangle shawl. It's got 3 straight sides. We're going to use blocking wires and pins. I'm using T-pins, and you also need a tape measure to check your size. So I'm just going to tip the camera down and then we'll get started. I'm doing this on my dining room table. I'm using Nipro blocking mats. Anything that you can put pins into is fine. Now, some people like to put a wire down the centre of the spine. I don't tend to do that because I don't think it's really necessary, but if you're struggling to get it sort of even and straight, it might be an idea. So I'm going to start in the centre here, and I'm going to put wires along the top. Now, it does have a yarn over edge. This is the beginning and end of the row, so that'll be the beginning and that'll be the end of your row. And it's got yarn overs, 2 stitches in from the edge. So I'm putting the wires through those yarn over holes. I'm doing it sort of in and out every 2 holes. So in, under 2 holes, in, to up, back out 2 holes later, and then 2 holes down, 2 holes out. So sort of every 2 holes, like that. Now when you, I'm hoping 1 wire will be enough for half the top edge of the shawl. There we go. So yeah, that should be okay. Obviously the shawl will stretch, so your wire will need to be longer than the edge you're going to stretch out. So now I'm going to go and do the other side. So again, I'm going to start from the middle, and I'm going to go 2 yarn overs up, and then 2 yarn overs down, up. So every 2 yarn overs. If you don't have yarn overs along the edge, then you can just put the wires into the fabric, but you just got to make sure that you keep it in a straight line. That's why if you've got some sort of yarn over edge or something like that, it's a lot easier just to put the wires into those holes. So there we go. Now I'm probably going to need to get some more mats to make this wider, but I'm not going to worry about that quite yet. So this is where I'm going to start pinning, and then I'm going to stretch it that way and then away. So I'm also going to put wires, one of my wires just fell on the floor, so I'm just going to also put wires along these edges. Again, I have on this one, I've actually got yarn overs a couple of rows in from the edge, so I'm going to go through the yarn overs again. Now, so if you've got a scalloped edge or a peaked edge or a picot edge or anything like that, I would put the wire through each picot or scallop or peak. I will show how to do that in one of the other tutorials. But this one's got a straight edge. Now if you haven't got any sort of yarn over edge to put it into, like I do here, then you have to just try and put it as close to the edge as you can, but try and make sure you keep it in a straight line. And you need to try and make sure that you put the wires through fairly close together, otherwise they could leave sort of, you could make the shawl sort of slightly scalloped if you have sort of big gaps between where you put the wires in. Okay, there we go. Okay, I may actually need 2 for that edge. We'll see how we do. Get another wire. I'm actually going to put 2 in on these edges because I think don't think one's going to be enough. So I'm going to actually take half of these out and put it back in again. So I put the wire in halfway because unfortunately it's not going to be enough to go all the way, and then start putting this one in where I stopped putting the other one. Right, so that's that edge wires there. So now I've got wire there across the top, so I'm just going to do the other side. So I'm going to start, because I'm going to have to do 2 wires here. So I'm going to start in the middle and do the bottom edge first. There we go, that's that one, and then this top edge. So making sure on this one, because the holes are quite big, I'm actually trying to put them every hole rather than every other hole. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to start pinning. So I'm going to start in the middle where the center spine is, and I'm going to put a pin in the center spine, and then I'm going to use the top edge of my blocking board to line this up. Okay, I'm actually going to So I'm not going to start pinning it, so I'm going to start where the center spine is, and I'm going to line it up with the top of my blocking boards. Now as you do this, you want to stretch it slightly. Now the width from here to, from the spine to the edge along the top, and from the spine to the bottom of the triangle should be the same distance, but if you want to have it a bit wider so it's got more of a wingspan, you can stretch it more across here, or if you want to have it longer you can stretch it down at the point a bit more. So you can kind of make one side longer than the other. Now to start with, I'm not measuring, I'm just sort of pinning it out sort of roughly. Let's just see what I've done here. Okay, there we go. Now do make sure that if you are not using wires, if you're just using pins, you have to put the pins really, really close together. And if you stretch it a lot, you will still get probably sort of scallops because it's impossible to have enough pins. So I'm now just going to move this over a bit because I need another couple of blocking mats. So I've just pushed the blocking mats over a little bit so I can fit another mat here. Right, I'm going to just use my blocking mats as a sort of measuring tool. So I've got one, two, three. So I've got 3 blocking mats from the centre to the edge. So I'm just going to do the same thing here. It is best to measure properly with a tape measure, but when I'm doing the sort of first rough pin out, I don't tend to use a tape measure unless it's something like a garment which has to be a specific size. So I've stretched it out and pinned it at the end and then I'm going to pin it so that it's up even with this edge, the top edge of my blocking mats. Okay, now I'm going to just pull this bit out of it, sort of roughly in the middle, and just put a pin there. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. Now what you have to be a little bit careful about now is if you pull a lot on one side, it will make the centre spine move over a bit and you'll be able to pull it less on the other side. So to start with, I just put a couple of pins in just to give a little bit of tension to the fabric. But I'm not pinning it out properly, I'm just going to sort of pull it out a bit so that I got sort of slight tension on my fabric. Okay, so now I'm going to pull this point down. Now that should be roughly the same length from the point to the top edge as there is from the top edge, top of the spine, out to one edge of the shawl. And because I know that that's 3 blocking mats from the centre out to each edge, and I got 3 blocking mats this way, I can just pin the end of the spine in line with the edge of the blocking mat. Now you can see my spine isn't completely straight. That's because I pulled it a bit more out on this side than I have on that side, and that'll even out as I block it. You can put a blocking wire down the centre of the spine if you want to make sure it's completely straight. I do that occasionally, but not very often. So now I'm going to start blocking out the sides. So to start with, I would just kind of pin it out roughly. You can see now as I'm pulling on this side, it's evening out the spine sort of straightening up a bit. So to start with, you just want to get a sort of rough idea of how much you can stretch it. And then you're going to do the same on this side. If you stretch it out the same amount on both sides, then your spine should be nice and straight. Oops. I just got my bracelet caught in the in one of my pins, so I've taken it off. So I can see now that my spine is nice and straight, so that means I've got about equal sort of pull from either side. So now I'm just going to stretch it a bit more and put more pins in. So I want to make sure that I stretch it as much as I can. See, I think that's going to be fine. I'm just going to put a couple of extra pins in at the top here, a couple of places where I left a bit of a big gap between each pin. So now I'm just going to move around to this side and put pins in on this side. So now I want to put the pins a bit close together. So now I'm kind of stretching it out to the final size, hopefully. Now I stretch my shawl as much as I can. It depends on where you're knitting, what kind of shawl it is and what kind of stitch pattern it is, but certainly with lace, I wouldn't say more is necessarily always better, but certainly I would say it would be hard to stretch it too much. So it's completely taut now. In fact, it's starting to lift at the edge there a little bit, so I'm just going to release the pressure a little bit here so it lies flat. Pulling a bit more on this side. You can see it's pulled the spine. Oops. Excuse me. Okay, so it's pulled the spine a little bit towards this side. It's not completely straight. So I'm just going to release this side a little bit. There we go. That's better. So I think that's about right. So if I just, so you can see the whole shawl. Now what I like to do to keep the shawls looking nicer for longer and so they keep the blocked shape, I tend to spray it with some spray starch. That's the one I use, Dr. Beckman spray starch. I just get it from my supermarket. Don't spray too much, but I like it, just helps it to keep the shape a bit more, especially as I'm blocking this to get it ready for a show. I just wanted to look nice and open for longer. You don't need spray starch, and it won't make it go completely stiff. It will still be soft. This is an optional thing. You don't have to spray starch, but I just like it because it just keeps the shape a bit better. My shawls get packed down a lot to take to classes and shows, and then they do sort of get a bit creased again. Now you always check your measurements, so if you're blocking something from a pattern, you can check the measurements. It should give you the full depth of the shawl, the wingspan of the shawl. You could also check from the point there straight out to the center edge here and the same distance there. I tend to do that with brand new shawls when I'm taking down the measurement for the pattern, but when I'm reblocking things I tend to do sort of more just by sight. It depends on how sort of fussy you want to be, really. If you haven't got anywhere that's big enough to block out the full width of the shawl, what you could do is you could fold that half over and then put a wire up the centre spine and then just fold it, block it in half basically. That way you do make sure that both halves are the same size. But it does take long to dry because you've got two sort of layers of fabric. Okay, well I hope this was helpful. If you've got any questions, please do ask, and I'll see you for the next lesson.